Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And when you go to apply and they ask you, how did you hear about Podgo? Make sure you tell them that the Vault Classic Music Review sent you.
He was the first one to actually be bare naked and honest with the realities of what the street and the consequences of the street can bring. You know, he was the Proust of the projects.
I'm out for presidents to represent me. I'm out for... That's right. Who wanna bet us that we don't touch? Let us stack treasures forever. Live treacherous, all the etceteras. To the death of us, me and my confidants, we shine. You feel the ambiance, your nigga just rhyme. By the ounce so accumulates like snow. We don't just shine, we illuminate the whole show.
It's like a conversation, right? It's like a conversation.
But see, he was always able to do that, man. Even with Ed Mad Wednesday, you would drop the beat a cappella, you would just talk to the crowd and rap, and they would just be sucked in, man. Like his whole style is conversational to me. When you rhyming, it's like
right.
It ain't just like rhyming. It's like, yo, he's actually talking to you.
Mike machete your flow. Your paper falls slow like confetti. Mine's a steady grow. Betty grow. Pay 5 in it for blow. Better believe I have 1160 to show. My dough flip like tape on.
It's the setup. It's the resolutions and the releases and the tension. This music got crazy tension. 1 minute you feeling like, ooh, and it lets you go. Then it got you like that again. You know what I mean? That's how the music takes you.
Right. Dead presidents is money. You know. It was our chase for our chase for the life, and I was our obsession with it because we didn't have it. You know, the reason why guys or rappers are drawn to Scarface and movies like that because they see themselves as the villain, and you see someone come from nothing and make it for how long, for however brief they make it. You know, that's something that draws you in. So I tell you half the story, the rest you filling in, long as the villain win. You know, it's that mentality.
I tell you half the story, the rest you fill it in, long as the villain win. I spin Japan yen, the dough flip like tape on.
Anything like that captures the time. That what was going on at that time, and it's just a part of that time. And when a song comes on, it instantly takes you back there. So truth resonates through time.
Welcome to the Vault Podcast. Classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Vault Podcast, Classic Music Reviews, presented by IV Creative. It's a perspective of the classics from a fresh point of view. We appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You could be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today is yours truly, B. Cox, and with me, I got my boy once again, J.O., here in the place to be. As always, Jay, appreciate you for hanging out with me again as we circle up and circle around the classics, as we always do here on the Vault Classic Music Review. Shout out to all the listeners out there, stateside and worldwide. Thank you all for continuing to give us the good feedback. Had some great feedback this week on our Helter Skelter review of Nocturnal. See, there's a lot of Boot Camp Click fans out there, so thank you all for continuing to spread the word and for following up with us on social media. We plan to have a lot of great things coming up here on the Vault Classic Music Reviews. As we always like to say here on the Vault, hashtag open the Vault, hashtag nothing but the classics. And as you heard prefaced into the episode before we started, you know what we're doing today. It's a special day. And as a matter of fact, Jay, when we started this week, you could see that there was a bit of a different feel around hip-hop nostalgia Twitter and hip-hop nostalgia social media because of the date that was coming up and what its significance is in hip-hop history. So, of course, we're going to go back 25 years. And we're going to go back to a very special time 25 years ago, a time that I like to call a magical time in hip-hop. And we're going to go back to June 25th, 1996, and look at none other than the legendary debut of Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, released June 25th, 1996, on Roc-A-Fella Records and Priority Records. The debut of a man that many people would consider to be the greatest rapper of all time. Some will definitely put him in his top 5. You definitely have to put him at the top of his generation of rappers, not only because of what he's been able to do on the mic, but because what he's accomplished outside of that as well. He's definitely transformed himself from an MC to being a entertainment executive to being now a mogul. And now he's bigger than probably anything that I would even think probably he ever even imagined. But it all started here, Jay. It all started with this album that came out in 1996 as the summer was just starting to get into swing, Reasonable Doubt. The debut studio album on Roc-A-Fella Records. Crazy, man. Recorded between Good times. Recorded between September 1994 and February of 96. The studio, the legendary D&D Studios. Like, how many classics have been recorded in those studios, man? How many classics were crafted in between those walls?
Man, classics, ass whoopings, all
types of things. Yes. A runtime of 55 minutes and 32 seconds. Executive produced by the Holy Trinity of Roc-A-Fella, by Sean Jay-Z Carter, by Dame Dash, by Kareem Biggs Burke. Producers on this, you know them very well. Primo, DJ Premier, DJ Ski, a.k.a. Ski Beats. Irv Gotti produced beats on here. Nobody. Peter Panic. Even Big Jazz, a.k.a. Jazz O, the originator, produced tracks on here as well. Clark Kent, all producers on this album. 4 singles from Reasonable Doubt. The first was the original Dead Presidents, followed thereafter by Dead Presidents Part 2, which is what you hear on the album. Ain't No Nigga, which came out featuring Foxy Brown. Can't Knock the Hustle, featuring Mary J. Blige, and then Feelin' It in April of 97. Other features on this album included, as we mentioned, Jazz O, Sauce Money on Bring It On, and the debut of Memphis Bleak on Coming of Age. So, Jay, here we are, man. Reasonable Doubt. Reasonable Doubt. There are certain albums when you talk to people and you have these discussions. You and I are in a lot of different groups with each other on Facebook. Mm-hmm. I'm in a lot of discussion circles in hip-hop Twitter, as they call it. I've been on Instagram. There are, I would say, about 24 albums that come up consistently when people reference some of the greatest albums of all time. And this is consistently one of the albums that was listed as one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time. You would agree?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just thinking back to that time, like, you know what I'm saying, like summer of 96 or just 96 in general. I mean, there were just so many, like, bangers just coming out back to back to back, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And I think we discussed it before, like, you know, how the 2 biggest were The Score and All Eyes on Me, but yeah, you know what I'm saying? You had this, you had It Was Written, you had Mistakes Side De La Soul. Yes. I mean, it was just so many coming out during that time. I think Machiavelli came out later that year, but Muddy Waters. I mean, it was just so many. Like, it's like everybody was just putting their foot into their albums back then, man. It was just such a beautiful time, and everybody was just on their A game. But this stream, like, I think Jay-Z caught it at the right time, like, you know, where everything was starting to shift back to the East Coast. Mm-hmm. You know, because that was like right before, you know, I guess you could say the fall of Death Row. Like, that was like you know, All Eyes on Me was like their last great hurrah, you know. So yeah, it was just like just the genius in that time and of it too when it came out.
Yeah, and then just to talk about that time, because that summer of 96, and I'm going to have a bonus episode about some of the greatest summer jams of that summer of 96. To me, when I talk about musically, one of the best summers when it came to music in regard to that time and how the music felt, how it made you feel.
Absolutely.
But just to give you an idea, in between those 2 weeks of June 25th and July 2nd, these are the albums that all came out between those 2 dates. Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt. On July 2nd, you had both De La Soul's Stakes Is High and Nas's It Was Written, released on July 2nd. Another great album was released on July 2nd, by the way, Jay, one of your favorites, a group called Crucial Conflict, The Final Tick. I just had to mess with Drew about that because I know how you feel about them. them and their venerable classic. Hey.
For anyone that's confused, I hate that group and that song with a passion. So continue.
Man, but this time, so I kind of want to, so before we even started getting to where we were, I want to talk about the time and this album in particular and how it was received then versus how it's received now by the public at large. When this album came out, I think most people would agree that they thought it was a solid album. I think most people, when they listened to it and said, yo, this is dope. And this dude, Jay, for a lot of people who didn't know about Jay-Z, and the majority of us who listened to hip-hop music, who were sort of listeners on the surface, meaning that we only listened to the radio and we only watched the videos, and we weren't really into, for those of us who weren't really into the magazines and or reading online at that time, which hip-hop, internet, journalism and websites were kind of at their infancy at that time, didn't really know a whole lot about Jay-Z. So I think we thought that the album was solid. But Jay, to me, and you can also comment on this as well, the reception of this album has gotten better, it seems, as time has passed. I think by the time Volume 1 came out, we looked at Reasonable Doubt like this is even far beyond a dope album. He even said it. By the time we got to Volume 2, I gave you Prophecy on my first joint, but y'all all lamed out. And you didn't appreciate it until the second one came out. And then by the time the new millennium came around, Reasonable Doubt had reached a whole nother mythology. By the time we've gotten past the 2000s and on to the 2010s, it has now reached to this rare air of being called one of the best albums of all time. It's amazing that I've seen that an album has really aged like this, because I can't really think of any other album, or there's maybe a handful of them that I could think about in the last 25 years that have aged the way like this has.
Yeah, I agree. I would say, like you said, everybody thought it was dope when it came out, but then like as his career progressed and everything like that, and you know what I'm saying, like it just like really creeped into the conversation as far as like, you know, those one of those staple albums, and like, you know, like how people looked at Wu-Tang's 36 Chambers or The Chronic by Dr. Dre or
Midnight Marauders.
Blank back there, but like you see what I'm saying as far as like that, like or All Eyes on Me or The Score, like, you know, it just like crept up to that conversation, or Illmatic, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
I really can't think of another album that's really done, that's performed like that.
Yeah,
at least in the court of public opinion.
I think if you were to talk to a few people in '96, there weren't many people that will put this in their top 5 of the year. Like, if you think about all the albums that came out, I think if you talked and polled 100 people, there would probably be less than 20 people that would put this in their top 5 of the year of 1996, which is amazing considering the legacy that it now has and the standing that it has in the game. I haven't seen an album age this well. I mean, I can't even say that Illmatic has aged as well, because I think Illmatic was acclaimed from the beginning, and we've always had high regard for it, and I think that it's grown even further than that. But I think the jump from what people first thought when this came out to where it is now was probably even bigger than it was in Illmatic, only because people saw Illmatic, they heard Illmatic, and knew that it was genius from the start. People weren't even thinking this was genius when it first came out. They just thought it was dope.
There's a line between genius and dope. Yeah, I feel what you mean.
Yeah, indeed. So I think that, while I don't want to say, I'm not saying that this is better than Illmatic. No, I'm not going to say that. But I am going to say that I think the jump, as far as the perception of it, has grown probably larger than the jump that Illmatic made from 94 to now. So that's just my opinion on it. Not saying that it's better. I'm just saying that the perception is probably perceived at a greater rate than Illmatic has, because of the starting point where we started with this versus where Illmatic started at. So we'll go back. Take us back to 96, Jay. When you first heard this album, what were you thinking? What was your perception? And then since then, how has it changed to the point to where you look at it now?
Yeah, so back in 96, I mean, remember that time vividly. I mean, especially with all the dopeness that was coming out. You just had plenty of soundtracks for that summer, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
when I first heard that, it was like, I didn't even get it right off, to be honest with you, because there was so many other dope projects coming out. So it's like, all right, let me get this, and I'm going to get to it once I get to it. But when I got to it, I was like, okay, yeah, it's straight rock. Like, you know, because the biggest one everybody heard by that point was like the Dead Presidents. The biggest thing was Ain't No Nigga, and then like the Dead Presidents joint.
Yeah.
You started listening to other joints on the album, like, I said, okay, yeah, you know what I'm saying? He definitely brings something to the table, and like, oh shit, he got this joint with Biggie, like he's going toe to toe with him, because you know, Biggie was definitely more of a bigger star at that point than Jay-Z.
Yes.
So, and then like even back to the Genius Ain't No Nigga, I mean, like bringing Foxy on there, because Foxy was already having a pretty good run, because I don't know if you remember back in like that summer, It was the Ain't No Nigga joint that was playing all over the place, and that Case joint, Touch Me, Tease Me when she was featured on it.
She was on fire. So that's this summer. Yeah.
Yeah. She had a great summer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So listen to it back then versus listening to it now. I mean, now like it almost like appreciates like a work of art. You know what I mean? Like you appreciate the lyricism and Lord knows the production. Combine all that to back like like the euphoria of that nostalgia. You know what I'm saying? Like to take it back to '96 when it was just like raw lyrics and Jay-Z wasn't the Jay-Z he is now. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with he is now, but he was more streets and more hip hop oriented back then. And obviously he's grown, progressed beyond that, but like, you know, it really just takes you back to that time. Like Jay-Z, we listen to your advice. You niggas want your old shit, buy your old albums. We listen to your old album, man, because it's still dope.
Exactly. It's still dope, man. That summer, like I said, man, a lot was going on. I was finishing my 8th grade year. I was starting summer track. I remember buying this album actually the same time that I bought It Was Written. It's crazy. One of my stories that I have is about being able to cop this and It Was Written at the same time. I had one of them on tape and the other one on CD because I couldn't afford both of them on CD at the time. You know what I'm saying? Grass cutting money only took me for so long. And if I was going to see if I can get them both, I had to buy one on tape and one on CD. So I bought It Was Written on tape and I bought this on CD. And I got on this album and started listening to it. And I think that, unashamed, I'll say this, and you could probably talk to any of my best friends back then, I got on this album and put people onto this album more than most people during that time. Why? Where do we live, Jay? In the DMV. What people loved back then. People loved Scarface. They loved Pac. Was there nobody checking for Jay-Z back then in the DMV like that? Like nobody. If you were, you were. If you were,
be on the radio.
Yeah, if you were from New York, but you weren't. Like, most of the dudes in DC were Pac fans. They didn't like Jay-Z, so nobody really was checking for him at that time. I think by the time I got to the end of my 9th grade year, and at this point, once that happens, Big has died, Pac has already died. Then all of a sudden, it's like, people were like, you're coming back to me like, that Reasonable Doubt joint with Jay-Z that you let me listen to, you got that joint? Can you dub that joint for me? It was almost like it sort of caught on like wildfire. By the time Volume 1 came out, I looked at my Reasonable Doubt CD as one of my prized possessions. And it stuck with me for the longest while until my CD collection and my great CD collection, which I had some classic CDs, actually was destroyed in that fire that I had a few years ago. But being able to listen to this, man, and hearing not just the lyrics, but it was, everybody talks about Jay and his double and triple entendres. You know what I'm saying? His wordplay is ridiculous. The production on here is what I noticed, like listening to those primo beats. And then being really for the first time getting familiar with ski beats in his work. Everybody will talk about Primo and his relationship with Dre, but I almost even think that the relationship that Jay had with Ski and what he curated on his albums was almost as equal to what Primo did on these first few albums that Jay had, which really helped to lay the foundation. The beats helped to pull me in. It was the wordplay. It was the fact that, he sort of had this, like he said in the piece before we started this episode, it was like a conversation. When you listen to this, it was sort of like he was having a conversation with you. That's one of the alluring factors with Jay-Z, how he's able to bring people in. And that's what helped to bring me into this album. Over these years, I sort of like pound myself on the chest a little bit because I understand and know that I was on this album even back then, even when nobody really was checking for Jay, and before, quote unquote, he had Volume 1, which was going to be named Heir to the Throne at first before he changed it to In My Lifetime. And at that point, when everybody started to get on Jay-Z, and I'm like on Volume 1, and I'm like, man, this joint is cool, but this ain't no Reasonable Doubt, though.
Right. See, I thought I was like an oddball for thinking that way too. It had some joints, but it wasn't like,
it's like, this ain't Reasonable Doubt.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I was one of those dudes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying the funny thing is, I think around that time, like, Diddy was like kind of in the forefront. So it was like almost like he was like trying to emulate Diddy in a sense, like that shiny shoe, that jiggy shit, however you want to call it, like, because remember on Volume 2 he kind of went back to the street shit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, with that Hard Knock Life beat, and like, you know what I'm saying, like, he really went back on that during his original flow.
Exactly. And Volume 1 has some joints, don't get me wrong, with the 1,000,001 Questions and Where I'm From, and
I love Where I'm From.
Who You With and Streets Is Watching. But to me, it wasn't this, because this Oh man, I mean, we'll go through it during I'm not even gonna call them highlights. Like, it'd be ridiculous for me to sit here and ask Jay and for me to put my highlights. Like, the whole album is a highlight. We're just gonna talk about favorites. But for me to even talk about my favorites and to compare it to this or really anything else that he's ever done would be absurd in some respect, because I mean, really, it's literally like this album is like 10 or 12-year-old scotch. You know, it literally sits there, and as the more you let it age, the more that, you know, the scotch gets that, you know, oak wood from the barrel, and you start to flavor and starts to set in, and it ages. By the time it gets poured out into your glass neatly, and you're sitting and enjoying it with a cigar, you understand the process, how it was made and why it was made and why it had to sit for so long in order for it to come out in your glass to come across as the perfect pour. And that's exactly what this is. This album is a perfect pour of a 12-year-old scotch. So now we'll talk about favorites, as we'll rename it. Not highlights and lowlights. We're going to talk about favorites. Jay, your favorites, 14 tracks on here. Just let me know what your favorites are, man. List them. List them.
Oh, shoot. Okay, so yeah, like, I love Friend or Foe.
Mm-hmm.
Primo. I mean, just like, I mean, yeah, Primo beats, like, the conversation aspect of it, like, he took it in a different direction with that conversation with the dudes that he, you know what I'm saying, they thought he was going to get the drop on him, but I'm not going to go on that plenty, but see other favorites. Can I Live, 22 Twos, yeah, the Coming of Age joint, and of course Brooklyn's Finest and Can't Knock the Hustle, so yeah, I'll probably name the whole album for real, but I would stop right there.
Yeah. Man, the way that the album starts with Can't Knock the Hustle, with that the skit that became popular over that Reasonable Doubt to the Volume 1, 2, and 3 with the Scarface / Carlito's Way, like, you know, theme and motif starting the beginning have big guy, you want to make some big bucks, huh? You know? And just like you sort of get the feeling like you talking about some hustler shit. And then to start the first track with that beat by Nobody and Sean Kane, the vocals by Mary J. Blige. I still think, you know, like, like, I'm in. You got me. I'm all the way in. You got me.
You have our attention now, sir.
Yes, you have our attention now. Brooklyn's Finest. I mean, come on, bruh. Like, yo, you talk about like Biggie and Jay going at it back and forth. Really, just I think somebody posted a picture and it was like a picture of like Jordan and Pippen doing something, and somebody said this is Jay-Z and Biggie on Brooklyn's Finest. I was like, yep, that sounds about right. That Clark Kent beat, the sample of, you know, ODB in the background, Jay-Z and Biggie Smalls, nigga, shit your drawers. Where you from? I mean, come on, dog. Like, it's, I could sit there and repeat that all day long. And the quotables from that song just themselves, we're going to get in the notable quotables. Crazy lines between both Jay and also Big. I mean, still Big is still a nigga and still fucked up for. If they had twins, he probably have two Pocs.
Twin Pocs.
Get it? Two Pocs. Oh, man. Dead Presidents. Look, man. Despite in that same documentary piece that we talked about that you heard in the beginning, when you listen and see Ski Beats talk about taking that A Garden of Peace by Lonnie Liston Smith sample to make the Dead Presidents beat, it's almost enough to make me want to cry, man, because that's an incredibly emotionally sounding piece of music. And
wait, didn't he also take like the drum piece from like the Tribe Called Quest? Oh my God, remix?
Yes, he took the drums from Tribe Called Quest, chopped that up. But the sample with that piano from Lonnie Liston Smith. Lonnie Liston Smith, by the way, graduate of Morgan State University. Shout out to Morgan State. So there's a connection here. But that piano, though, like you talked about the emotions in that, to be able to make a track like Dead Presidents, I say this unabashedly. I may be wrong. Some of y'all may think I'm crazy. Dead Presidents is still my favorite Jay-Z track of all time. Part 2. It's still my favorite Jay-Z track of all time. Because there's not a single Jay-Z track that gets me going, that makes me think about the hustle, the journey, the ascent, the triumph of everything like Dead Presidents Part 2. Nothing like it. And then we talk about Primo's beats. The Evils. I mean, come on, dog. Like, this is why Primo's a genius. He takes samples from Murder Was the Case, takes samples from My Shot Your remix, And then then the lyrics from Jay-Z about the, I mean, goodness. Like, this is the reason why Jay and Primo work, is because when you have an artist, like Jay was saying in the beginning, it's almost like these beats were tailor-made with the artist in mind. That beat was made for him, was made for Jay-Z. 22 Twos is clever. Can I Live is, to me, still a top 5 Jay-Z track. I don't care what anybody says. Produced by Irv Gotti. Cashmere Thoughts, which is like, I think a lot of people won't mention this, but Cashmere Thoughts, I think, is Jay at almost like his wordplay wittiest. The fact that he starts it off, I talk jewels and spit diamonds. I mean, and then that sample for Cashmere Thoughts, Save Their Souls by Bohannon, which we've heard a couple of different times. Music Soul Child has used that. Total used that sample as well. That was produced by Clark Kent. Bring It On, which is, I thought, a good penultimate song on the album with Jazzo, and then with Sauce Money. Sauce Money led that song off, and he was like Ricky Henderson leading off that song. You know what I mean? Because Sauce Money comes out of nowhere and spits 16 bars of hot fire right before Jay takes over. And then Jazz closes the song out, and then, you know, closes it out with one of the greatest lines: never take the clean brown sugar for the dirty green cream. You know what I mean? Or however he said it. But whatever. It was still like a great way to close out Bring It On, produced by Primo. So those are just some of my highlights, man. I could talk about, of course, man, 22 Twos, like I said, clever. Friend or Foe, I got to agree with you there. That conversational piece, he talks about, like, you know, dudes trying to get the drop on him. And it's like he's bringing you through this pretty much step by step. And didn't leave out, of course. Like you said, you can name the whole album, man. But Politics as Usual. That beat by Ski, featuring that sample on Politics as Usual, which is the Stylistics Hurry Up This Way Again. The thing I love about Ski, and watching him as well on social media, I love what he does when it comes to chopping up samples and really flipping beats. He's still on top of his game even 20-something years later, almost 30 years later. I can't really even say a low light per se, but if there is a low point on this album because of how good everything else is, it would have to be, to me, Ain't No Nigga. And that's not even really a low light, because to me, if we're talking about, if all the other tracks on here are somewhere between a 12 and a 15 on a scale of 10, this is probably on a 9 level, you know, an 8.5 level. That's really the only like dip to me, I think, that you get. And the only dip to me isn't the lyrics with either him or Foxy. It's the beat. You know, I mean, the beat is something that I really wasn't able to get into, but it's still, I mean, but hey, look, it kind of works because it's a radio track. You know what I'm saying? That's what it was made for. And even if I'm not mistaken, I believe this even showed up. Ain't No Nigga was on the Nutty Professor track, you know? And
and you gotta remember the other thing with that, man, like Jay wanted Dead Presidents to be the first breakout joint. That was on the, Ain't No Nigga was the B-side.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that Dead President, that was more underground street. Ain't No Nigga was like more upbeat and like radio friendly, but then like DJ started playing that and that blew up. So you know what I'm saying, like fuck, I guess I might as well roll with this.
Right. Yeah, indeed. So that's really, if there is any a low point, but it's relative when we're talking about low points. And then I don't think either one of us talked about this, but Feeling It as well, though. I mean,
yeah.
If y'all niggas ain't talking about large money, what's the point? And then those vocals.
I felt like Feeling It was like a part 2 to In My Lifetime.
In My Lifetime, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
definitely.
It had the same feel to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely had the same type of feel to it. Also produced by Ski, by the way.
Sense.
Makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So those vocals by Mecca with that hook definitely helps to set the song off as well. Now we'll get into notable quotables. So I'd love to hear what you picked for this, what your notable quotable is.
I say like the second verse of Can I Live?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really just the whole joint, like, my mind is infested with sick thoughts that circle like Alexis. If driven wrong, it's sure to hurt you. Do it like duplexes in unity. My crew and me commit atrocities like we got immunity. You guessed it, manifested. I'm intangible goods, platinum Rolexes. We don't lease, we buy the whole car as you should. My confederation, a dead nation, explode on detonation, overload the mind of a said patient. When the boils to steam and comes to it, we all fiends gotta do it. Even righteous minds go through this. True this, the street school us to spend our money foolish, bond with jewelers and watch for intruders. I stepped it up on another level, meditated like a Buddhist, recruited lieutenants with ludicrous dreams of getting cream. Let's do this. It gets TDS, so keep winding open like CBS.
You see stress, right? Can I live?
Right.
Yeah. I was at the, I think it was the the Magna Carta Holy Grail tour, I actually went to Verizon. When he did this track, he actually did the second verse completely a cappella. And the crowd went crazy when he did that joint. It was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I keep one eye open like CBS. Indeed. My notable quotable comes from, as I said, Dead Presidents Part 2 is my favorite Jay-Z track of all time. The second verse. He says, you know what? I make you and your whack mans fold like bad hands, roll like Monopoly, advance, you copper me like white crystal. I gross the most at the end of the fiscal year than these niggas could wish to. The dead presidential candidate with the sprinkles in the presidential ice that'll offend you in due time when cries flees my mind. All sneak thieves when player haters can shine. But until then, I keep the trillion cut diamond shining brilliant. I tell you half the story, the rest you fill it in. Long as the villain win, I spend Japan yen to 10 major events. Catch me in the joints, convince my iguanas is biting. J-A-Y hyphen, controlling, manipulating. I got a good life, man. Pounds and pence. Enough dollars make sense while you ride the bench. Catch me swinging for the fence, dead presidents. You know this. Uh-huh. Jay was talking his shit on that verse. Like, I'm talking about, you want to talk about some like large money talk? I mean, the type of shit he's talking about, some roll like Monopoly, advance, you copper me like white crystals. I gross the most at the end of the fiscal year than most niggas can wish to. Like, what?
he was in the zone on that shit, man. Like damn, Jay, almost like he was trying to compete to be king of New York back then.
Like he was trying to compete to be king of New York even back then, despite the fact that it was still niggas like Biggie and Nas and other ones who were out there. Like, Jay has been nice. He didn't just become nice overnight and he talk about some, now he's spitting most of these tracks off the top of the dome and he's not writing anything down. In that documentary, he was talking about he would write stuff down, but then eventually he had to start memorizing stuff more and more. So he said he would get whatever he could write stuff down. He would be on the train. He said his travels when he was hustling was taking him further away from New York down, like he said, to Philly, to Baltimore, to D.C., to down south. And whenever he would write things down, he would write them down and have to sit there and memorize more and more. So a few lines here, a few lines there, to the point where he had everything memorized, and it got to the point where he was like, all right, I'm not going to sit here and write these things down no more. Now I'm going to just memorize whatever it is that I'm coming up with. But this is the type of shit that you talk, man. 3 verses of pure fire on Dead Presidents Part 2, by the way. You know what I mean? A lot of people prefer the Part 1. To me, I don't. I think his better bars are on this one. And that's just my opinion, though. A lot of people will argue with me, but I don't give a damn. I think this is better. So just my personal opinion, bro. So now let's talk a little bit about, man, ever since then, we've now seen what Jay has put out. We know what the charts have done. Charts has said. I want to say now it's 13 solo albums he has come out with. We did the tail of the tape, of him and Nas. We went through all the albums that Jay went out. How do you think like this set the table for what he put out later? Like even going into the volume 1s, 2, and 3, and then after that, when we got into the new millennium, where it was like Roc-A-Fella Familia and the new rock, pretty much into the new millennium, which spawned the Blueprint and the Black album, and then all these other blueprints, 2.1 and 2.0 and
right.
Everything else. Like, how do you think this sort of set the table, man? Like, what is your perspective on how this sort of set the table for him to be the rapper that he eventually became to be? Most people saying he was the best in the game.
Yeah, so I mean, like with this strain, I mean, obviously it put it on. It just really like was groundbreaking for Roc-A-Fella Records altogether. And as you can see how it's aged, I mean, like it's really like crept its way into the conversation as far as like some of the greatest albums of all time. I mean, it's even to the point like people study Reasonable Doubt as like, as like the way they structure their own rhyme, or like, what journey, like, saying people listen to to get inspired like they would like any other ones I named.
Yeah.
And as far as that, I mean, so of course it has that legacy beyond that. I mean, as far as like it going into translating to the other later albums he put out. I mean, like I said, with In My Lifetime Volume 1, I feel like he jumped off the porch a little too soon with that one. Mm-hmm. Like I would say, like, let's say that joint came out now over in the past 10 years or something. Okay, I could look at it a little bit differently, but it was a pretty drastic change, although still had his dope joints on it from Reasonable Doubt to Volume 1, as far as like, he kind of jumped off the porch a little too soon. I know he was balling, doing his thing, but it kind of like, he was kind of like going with the flow as opposed to being the flow.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So
I
think that's one of the things like that affect his decision to go back to, you know what I'm saying, to that street aspect of it, like, you know what I'm saying, using that Andy sample with the Hard Knock Life drain, like the drain, if I should die, don't cry, my niggas, get high, my niggas, bust bullets in the sky, my niggas, like,
yeah.
And which I felt on a different level as far as like shit back then, but like I said, how I went back with like him, the whole nigga what, nigga who drain.
Yeah.
Like he went back before Reasonable Doubt as far as like, you know,
yeah, his flow.
You had to go forward, and like Money Cash Hoes, and then Volume 3 came out. Sounded a step up from, you know what I'm saying, Volume 2 and everything like that, because I mean that drain had bangers on it too, and that was like right before, that came out like 99, so like right before the new millennium.
Yeah.
I know you said like Dead Presence probably is basically your favorite joint. For me, I would say like It's Hot, Some Like It Hot, just because like how basic that beat is and how hard that shit hits. So yes, I mean it definitely set the pace to show that Jay is a heavyweight contender, and you know what I'm saying, he definitely took the last probably like longer than most rappers, like, you know, even like the ones we regard as legends in their time. So
yeah,
I mean he definitely's earned his way onto that Mount Rushmore, you know, so to speak.
Yeah, and I mean, my saying, I have a complicated answer to that, because we talked earlier, you said the thing about Jay said, niggas want my old shit, so buy my old albums. And I think I'm probably the biggest perpetrator of that, because I've seen what Jay's capable of. But I also understand and know that everybody's not going to be the same. Like, Jay is a guy who has evolved, not just as a man. He's evolved as an MC, as an artist. He's evolved as a businessman. He's a family man now. You know, he's got his kids. He has a legacy that he's wanted to leave. He said this a lot on the 444 album as well. That to me was the, you know, Jay's been all grown up and let me bare my soul to the world to let them know all my sins and me making my confessions. You know, that really was what that album was. And I felt I had a mixed feeling about it, because I know what Jay is, I know what he's capable of. This newer Jay-Z that has emerged, I want to say even after American Gangster, is a Jay that I haven't recognized. And I understand that he's different. I understand that he's now worth close to $1 billion, and him and his wife together are worth a couple of $1 billion. I get and understand all of that. But when I hear Reasonable Doubt and see this is the Jay that I fell in love with, and the Jay that made me think that this is another aspect of MCing and how elite it can be.
Right.
When I hear these last few Jay albums, these Magna Carta Holy Grails, these Blueprint 3s, this 444, I leave a little bit unsatisfied. And I get it.
444?
I had a mixed bag feeling about it. I loved, as we said during the tail of the tape, I loved No ID's production. I loved it. But as far as Jay's bars were concerned, I felt as though he was saying some really valid things, and quality as far as like his level of MCing was still elite, but I felt as though it was a little lazy. Like, I felt he's been lazy in these last like 10 years or so. And I guess you can earn the right to be lazy when you've put a body of work together where you've put questionably 3 of the greatest hip hop albums of all time out there, and several others that can be in the conversation as far as the best hip hop albums of either this generation, or if you're doing like a top 500 list, are in the consideration for those as well. You get, when you're at the top of the industry and you've got to the top of the charts, that you can sort of be a little lazy. But I can't help but to sort of compare Jay to Nas and see the level of MCing and how I seen that, you know, I think both of them have maybe taken a little bit, a tiny step down, but I feel as though I think Jay has gotten, because of all the other things he's involved in, that his energy really isn't into MCing anymore. My thing is, like, if he's not, then don't do it, you know? Especially when you come from what we were used to hearing, starting all with Reasonable Doubt. So I may be I know that I'm in the minority of that, but when I come from this, and I know that he's not going to talk hustling anymore, because he's not hustling. Not even from a business standpoint. He's not hustling anymore because he's the boss, okay? He has capos and soldiers working to do stuff for him, and he's literally protected by all the other things that his business enterprise provides. I get that. I understand that. I just know that when I hear Reasonable Doubt, I hear what can be possible from what a lot of people will consider to be one of the top MCs of all time. I think that, as you said, Volume 1, I felt there was a little bit of a step back. I felt like he stepped up a little bit more on Volume 2. I think when we got into the Roc La Familia and the new rock afterwards, I felt as though he was changing, but I felt he got it back on the Blueprint and then took another step back again with Blueprint 2, and then definitely steps back up with the Black Album. But then after that, it's a mixed bag of results. And I think that's coming from this, that's really what disappointed me more so than anything. But you can't compare this to anything else. I don't think there is a album in his catalog that compares to this. Not even Blueprint. I don't even think compares to this. So that's my opinion.
Wow. So not even the first Blueprint.
Not even the first Blueprint, man. I know people will put the first Blueprint over this, but I ain't one of them.
Yeah, I say it's a close second in my opinion.
It's a close second, but it's not over this
not more
joint.
Reasonable Doubt. No.
Yeah, not at all. So,
and I will say, like, back to your point about 444. I mean, like, that was like one of the things I said when it first came out. I'm like, yeah, this is some of the best Jay-Z we've heard in like a minute. Mm-hmm. Not on a Reasonable Doubt level, not on like that level, but compared to like the other projects that had come out recently, yeah, that was like a step up. So
Yeah.
I get what you're saying there.
yeah, compared to Blueprint 3 and compared to Kingdom Come and Magna Carta Holy Grail, yeah. It was. Yeah, it was. So, yeah, man, this is just a formality. When we talk about the test, the final test, the test of time, what do we think?
Certified classic. Certified classic.
Certified classic, 10 out of 10 out of 10 out of 10. This is a joint that if you get it, you hold on to it. If you can get it on vinyl, you keep it and you preserve it. If you still have the original CD, you keep it and make sure that it doesn't get damaged. Unfortunately, I have my copy of Reasonable Doubt, the first one, on CD. And I lost it in a fire, along with a lot of other quote-unquote fire that I had as well. And I lost it. But this is literally, man, when you're talking about they make a documentary, another great podcast series that somebody can check out. It's by Break the Atoms on Twitter. They have a making and a documentary and look back behind the scenes of Reasonable Doubt. Please make sure y'all go check it out, man. If you think that you knew everything to know about this album, Jay, please make sure you go check that, man. And everybody else out there, go check that out. It's at Break the Atoms.
I will.
Yeah. At Break the Atoms on Twitter. They have a series on Reasonable Doubt now that it's 25 years old. Please go check it out. It's a must for every hip-hop fan. Jay-Z Reasonable Doubt at 25. Of course, everybody has seen now that there was a big spat between Jay and Dame about selling this NFT for Reasonable Doubt. Dame tried to sell it. Jay blocked it. And now Jay commissioned the artist to make this NFT, and it will now be available. Who knows how much it's going to go for, but NFTs and everything else aside, man, this is a great, great project. This is one of the best of all time. To me, I think it's still his best album even 25 years later. So if you haven't listened to it yet, you've been hiding under a rock for the last 25 years, please go check it out wherever you can get music, on Tidal, on Apple Music, wherever. Make sure y'all go check it out and listen to this classic. And that is going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you are checking us out on our host on Red Circle. You can also download, stream, and subscribe to The Vault Classic Music Reviews on any one of our streaming sources. If you go to the link in our link tree in our bio of all of our social media pages, you'll get to all of our streaming sources and then also all of our social media pages. You can follow The Vault Classic Music Reviews on at Vault CMR Podcast on Instagram, at Vault Classic on Twitter, and on Facebook and YouTube. You can search The Vault Classic Music Reviews Podcast. Like the Facebook page. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Interact with us on social media. We love the feedback when you guys get feedback here with us. We do it here all for you. We appreciate the support. And if you have a friend, tell a friend. And make sure that that friend tells a friend. Always remember to keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud. And as we close, we'd like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because you were never destined or created to stay stationary in this life. And on that note, we say peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.
Celebrate this July 4th with a special presentation of A Capital Fourth. Join your host Vanessa Williams with performances from Sea to Shining Sea, starring Jimmy Buffett, Gladys Knight, Alan Jackson, Cynthia Erivo, Pentatonics, Renee Fleming, Train, Jennifer Nettles, Mickey Guyton, Jimmy Allen, Ali E. Cravalho, Laura Osnes, Ali Stroker, and the greatest live fireworks display in the USA. It's A Capital Fourth, sponsored by the Boeing Company and American Airlines. Sunday, July 4th, 8/7 Central, only on PBS.